Have you ever been late to meet a friend, rushing in with apologies tumbling out of your mouth? "I'm so sorry I kept you waiting." Now imagine this instead. You arrive, slightly out of breath, and say, "Thank you for waiting for me." Same event, same delay, but the energy in the room shifts. One phrase centers your mistake. The other acknowledges their kindness. This small linguistic twist holds a quiet but powerful truth. The words we choose don't just describe reality, they shape it. Sorry and thank you may appear interchangeable in certain moments, but they are not emotional synonyms. One leans into guilt and responsibility. The other radiates appreciation and connection. And this subtle difference might just change how we feel about ourselves and how others respond to us. The act of replacing an apology with gratitude isn't about denying wrongdoing. It's about reframing the moment. It's about recognizing that most social missteps, being late, asking for help, interrupting, aren't just personal failings but shared human experiences. And in those moments, what people often want most is not self-blame, but acknowledgement and warmth. But why does this switch from "I'm sorry" to "thank you" feel so emotionally different? What psychological levers are we unknowingly pulling when we choose one over the other? And how might a small change in vocabulary lead to a larger transformation in how we think, feel, and relate? Sorry is a word rooted in acknowledgement of fault. It arises from a desire to restore harmony after a perceived disruption. When used appropriately, such as after hurting someone's feelings or causing real harm, an apology is a powerful tool of emotional repair. But when overused for minor social infractions, it can create unintended consequences. Psychologically, saying "I'm sorry" too often can reinforce a pattern of self-minimization. It places us in a position of emotional debt, implying that we've taken something away or caused damage, even when none was intended or perceived. Over time, especially for people who are already inclined toward people-pleasing or anxiety, habitual apologizing can subtly erode self-confidence and heighten sensitivity to social judgment. In contrast, "thank you" invites a mindset of abundance rather than lack. Instead of focusing on your misstep, it focuses on the other person's kindness. Rather than signaling guilt, it expresses appreciation. This doesn't just feel better, it fosters emotional reciprocity. When someone hears "thank you," they feel seen and valued. You're not asking them to forgive you, you're affirming their patience, generosity, or support. This shift is powerful because it changes the underlying emotional script of the interaction, where "sorry" implicitly says, "I did something bad, and I hope you'll overlook it." "Thank you" says, "You did something kind, and I appreciate it." One subtly draws attention to failure, the other to connection. Behavioral studies and social psychology back this up. Research has shown that expressions of gratitude enhance social bonds, increase empathy, and even improve physical health. Meanwhile, excessive apologizing, especially for things outside of one's control, can be interpreted as insecurity or even insincerity. People are more likely to connect with someone who expresses warm, grounded appreciation than someone who appears constantly remorseful. And so the words we use become more than just habitual responses. They become reflections of how we see ourselves in relation to others. Are we a burden, or are we part of a cooperative, generous exchange? Language is never just language. It is a mirror of culture, a map of shared values. And when it comes to sorry and thank you, different societies chart very different emotional terrain. In many Western cultures, particularly those influenced by individualism, such as the United States or Canada, thank you is a social staple. It's used casually and frequently, sprinkled into daily interactions from customer service exchanges to conversations between friends and colleagues. In these cultures, expressing gratitude is often seen as a sign of emotional intelligence and self-assuredness. Saying thank you is a way to acknowledge others while maintaining one's own dignity. In contrast, more collectivist cultures, especially in parts of Asia, often place a higher emphasis on humility, harmony, and avoiding confrontation. In countries like Japan, Korea, or Vietnam, sorry may be used more liberally, not necessarily as a sign of personal guilt, but as a form of social lubricant. In these contexts, apologies are not just about right and wrong, they're about smoothing over the discomfort of any social disruption, even the tiniest one. For example, in Japanese, the word sumimasen can mean "excuse me," "thank you," or "I'm sorry," depending on tone and context. The boundaries blur because the social goal is not to assert emotion but to maintain relational balance. That's why in some Asian workplaces, even a superior may apologize for an inconvenience caused by a subordinate because the apology isn't personal, it's collective. But this cultural contrast reveals something deeper. The power dynamics and emotional priorities embedded in language. Western gratitude emphasizes individual acknowledgement. Eastern apology emphasizes group cohesion. And yet, both systems can become distorted. In the West, gratitude can become superficial, automated, a reflex rather than a felt experience. In the East, apology can become so normalized that people internalize guilt for things well beyond their control. That's why the sorry versus thank you conversation isn't about choosing one over the other universally. It's about becoming more intentional, more conscious about the emotional messages we send and receive. It's about recognizing when we're saying sorry because we truly mean it, and when we're using it as a shield. Likewise, it's about saying thank you not out of politeness, but out of true recognition. Words aren't just social tools, they're neurochemical triggers. Every time we say something, especially with emotion attached, we activate neural circuits that shape how we feel and how we relate to the world. So, when we speak, we aren't just talking to others, we're also training our own minds. Neuroscience has increasingly revealed how gratitude is a cognitive and emotional amplifier. When we say thank you and mean it, our brains release dopamine and serotonin neurotransmitters associated with pleasure, motivation, and emotional regulation. Over time, repeated expressions of gratitude can literally rewire the brain, strengthening positive thinking patterns and reducing symptoms of depression and anxiety. It's not just feel-good fluff. In a study from the University of California, researchers found that participants who kept gratitude journals for just a few weeks experienced improved sleep, reduced inflammation, and more pro-social behavior. That's the biological power of acknowledgement. In contrast, chronic apologizing, especially when not warranted, activates a very different set of brain patterns. Frequent apologies can reinforce a stress response, subtly telling the brain, "I've done something wrong. I'm under threat." This can increase cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, which over time contributes to fatigue, lowered immunity, and emotional hypersensitivity. Even more concerning is the internal narrative that builds from excessive apologizing. Saying, "I'm sorry" too often can cultivate a background sense of unworthiness. It makes us narrators of our own inadequacy, even when no one is blaming us. We shrink ourselves, word by word, without even realizing it. But when we flip the frame, when we say, "Thank you for understanding," instead of, "Sorry, I'm such a mess," we build a different internal story, one of resilience, one of trust, one of connection. Gratitude doesn't mean ignoring mistakes or bypassing accountability. Rather, it reframes the moment from one of damage to one of relationship. It says, "I see your patience. I recognize your kindness. I value you." And in doing so, it lifts not just the receiver, but also the speaker. This shift isn't just about manners, it's about mental hygiene, about tending to the emotional environments we create in our minds, our conversations, and our communities. Adopting a gratitude-first mindset is not about erasing sorry from your vocabulary. It's about choosing it purposefully and using it meaningfully. It's about catching those reflexive apologies that serve no real social or emotional function and replacing them with words that uplift, acknowledge, and connect. Here are a few simple swaps that reveal how powerful this shift can be. Instead of "Sorry, I'm late," try "Thank you for waiting for me." Instead of "Sorry, I messed up," say "Thank you for your patience as I figure this out." Instead of "Sorry for talking so much," offer "Thank you for listening." Instead of "Sorry for bothering you," try "Thank you for making time for me." These aren't just polite variations, they reshape the emotional tone of the moment. They communicate awareness without self-deprecation and gratitude without guilt. And, perhaps most importantly, they affirm the value of the other person's action, rather than highlighting your perceived shortcoming. This doesn't mean apologies become obsolete. When harm is done, "I'm sorry" is vital. A sincere apology, especially when followed by change, is one of the most healing forces in human relationships. But too often, we use apologies not to repair damage, but to smooth over discomfort our own or someone else's. And when that happens, we miss an opportunity to cultivate something more nourishing: appreciation. One practical exercise is this. Over the next week, pay attention to how often you apologize in your everyday life. Ask yourself in each case, was this really a situation that called for an apology, or could it have been a moment of gratitude instead? You'll likely find, as many do, that once you begin to catch the sorry yes, you also begin to feel lighter, more grounded, more connected. And surprisingly, others respond to you differently as well. They relax, they smile more. They feel seen not just as someone who's been inconvenienced, but as someone who matters. Language, after all, is relational currency, and gratitude is one of the most generous investments we can make. In the end, the difference between sorry and thank you is not just grammatical, it's philosophical. It reveals whether we choose to center our flaws or to center connection, whether we lead with guilt or gratitude, whether we see life as something we're constantly getting wrong or something we're lucky to participate in. When you walk through life with a thank you mindset, you don't ignore your imperfections. You embrace them without apology. You acknowledge others not because you feel guilty, but because you feel grateful. You build relationships not on a foundation of penance, but on one of mutual recognition and appreciation. The beauty of this shift is its simplicity. It doesn't require therapy, meditation retreats, or reading a dozen self-help books. It just requires a pause, a breath, a moment of awareness before you speak, and the willingness to ask, what do I really want to say here? Am I apologizing because I believe I've done harm or because I feel uncomfortable? Can I say thank you instead? This small moment of introspection can spark a big change in your relationships, in your self-image, and even in how others show up around you. So next time you're late, forgetful, overwhelmed, or just human, pause before you say, I'm sorry, and ask yourself, what if I said thank you instead? You might just find that people smile more, that your own shoulders feel lighter, that your language stops echoing guilt and starts creating grace. And for reading all the way through, thank you.